Welcome back to your Feel Good Breakfast Show. This is Expresso. It's S3 and it's an important moment that we need to start talking about mental health, not just as a facet of a certain month to observe it. It should happen every single day. As South Africa faces rising rates of depression, anxiety and trauma, we're sitting down with some of the most incredible and supportive people that I know, specialist wellness counselor and co-owner of Arise Mental Wellness, Christiane Irene is here alongside registered counselor and resident Feel Good Breakfast Show extraordinaire and VIP, Shanaz Moos is here to unpack what's really going on in our mental health landscape. Ladies, thank you very much. I'm so happy to see both of you. And I did mean it. You know, there are so many times where it's Mental Health Awareness Month. It's October, we know. However, this should be a conversation every single day. But Christiane, let's start with you. Now, we live in a very dynamic country. And I know this from going to visit another country. My brother now stays in Dubai. I go to Dubai and I go visit there, and they even have a minister of happiness, and on it goes, right? Then you return to South Africa and you see a lot of things that are actual stresses that provide us with outside stimulus that we have no control over. I'm talking unemployment, socioeconomic struggles, pressures, etc. In 2024, what are some of the mental health, I'm going to call them trends, that you've been picking up on?
Well, actually, the scary thing is when we say South African youth, it is a very big bracket. It goes from our grade 8s facing their very first high school exams, all the way to our young adults, our students who are entering the work field. These are our ripe and ready South Africans. They are our next frontier. And yet we are seeing so much anxiety, depression and stress directly related to the academic pressures that they are facing. Also, the high unemployment rate. Now, the challenge is they are ripe and ready to join the work field and being faced with rejection, failure, adding to that depression, adding to that anxiety. Going into the trends, then it goes into social media.
That's another conversation. That's going to take a couple of more hours for that as well.
Escaping your stresses of your day-to-day, scrolling your phone adds to the anxiety, adds to that depression. It actually adds to the stress when we're seeing these comparisons. Social media is both bringing such a wonderful awareness to mental health, but it's also adding to so many of the challenges being faced, making us able to compare and see the hardships. And of course, all of this adds to the stigma and the challenge to access mental health services.
Yes, it does. But of course, we are solution-driven people. We love where we are as well. I do want to just touch on, Shanaz, is that in this country as well, I think without even knowing it, we have been dealing with the word trauma on a number of different levels. You think about, I'm saying something like load shedding. I know we make a joke about it. I'm just saying, I know we make a joke about load shedding. We always do that. We're like, load shedding and load shedding. But think about this for a second. It can and has been a trauma for some individuals. We look at society, we look at our political situation. There are so many things that have created these, I'm going to call them micro traumas in us that go not identified. So Shanaz, in this particular 2024, how impactful of those micro traumas and even the larger traumas in our early development lives, you know, we're carrying that around. And it's something that I think we never really get a chance to take stock and focus on the you in the middle of the word trauma. So talk to me about the impact of that in this context.
There's a lot of people that don't even realize they are sitting with micro traumas. And I just was chatting as my makeup was being done about trauma and ADHD. I was listening to a podcast about that a lot of things are misdiagnosed. So we all have a version of trauma from our childhood to our current life. And a micro trauma is not having Wi-Fi, which is what I had for 21 days. I still have. So I'm currently
going... still without?
Yes, I'm changing ISP. So when you think about what happens for the normal person, someone else may be, how can that be trauma? You don't know. Or going to my grocery cupboard and there's no food. And I've got kids, that's trauma. So all of us have these stored micro traumas that we dismiss, but our body is telling us there's something wrong. Our sleep patterns, our eat patterns. We are actually living, walking trauma beings. And we don't have enough acknowledgement that that's actually trauma. You want permission. I know I'm going through something. I don't need someone's permission, but most people want to be told, this is trauma, you need support.
Yes.
So acknowledging it for yourself is such an important thing, because different things build up. We only have a certain amount of capacity to cope.
Yeah.
So if we have micro trauma upon eventually, there's a breaking point, and load shedding was a big trigger for me. It was hectically traumatic. I felt I was in a narcissistic relationship with Eskom, and I was having all these feelings, and I realized this is bad. You make promises you can't keep, all of these things.
Exactly why I said it.
So I know, and someone else may not understand that, but each person's, what triggers you and what, unsettles you, it's unique to you.
Yes, and that's the thing about this trauma thing, is that it's something that is so not acknowledged because perhaps society tells us that we cannot afford to stop and identify the traumas. We just have to keep on moving on. Ons gaan maar aan. Don't worry, man, you'll be fine. Let's move on. That's unhealthy. And I think that's why it's important for us to continue this conversation. So ladies, stand by, because I still want to talk about identifying, let's just say, trauma, or if there is any mental distress in somebody. I think it's important to touch on those key points, so that if you're a parent, if you're a teacher, if you are an older sibling, that you can identify it with people around you, which is vitally important. So Shanaz and Christiane are not going anywhere. We have a part 2. And of course, 063-408-8863. If you'd like to answer or ask any questions, we'd love to answer them with this particular panel. And we want to show up for individuals who need to talk about mental health. Today is your day. And if you haven't yet, start today.
It's my Feel Good Breakfast Show.
Welcome back to Feel Good Breakfast Show. I missed you so much. I'm glad that you are here. Once again, we are continuing our conversation around South Africa's mental health crisis. And we have Christiane, Irene, as well as Shanaz Moas here, focusing on the role of technology crisis prevention in schools and practical coping mechanisms for daily stress. Now, to start off, Christiane, can we talk about how do you identify when there is an issue that requires intervention?
Oh, I would say there's very much 4 most common things that we can identify. This would be academic decline, especially when we talk about our South African youth.
Yes.
This would be our behavior changes. We can also see it in almost changes in sleep, appetite behavior, sleeping much more, eating much more, sleeping much less, eating much less. And again, almost those out of character behaviors. Let's say it's emotional outbursts. Let's say it's sudden withdrawal. These 4 symptoms, or common symptoms to see, are almost indicative of the stresses, the anxieties that are underlying in a person, and can be seen by a guardian, a parent, a teacher, and really brought to someone's attention and helped.
Thank you so much. I think it's key to notice these things, and it's also key to address them accordingly. Not everybody is ready, and that's why we do need certain coping mechanisms that you may see, Shanaz, within how people deal with, whether it be youth or individuals. Some of the coping mechanisms, I think, at play with regard to, let's just say, when there is a mental health issue. I want to track through some of those, especially when it comes to well-being. How do you see those manifesting, and in terms of your experience, the coping mechanisms that I suppose you see that perhaps is not so good?
I think that, to me, the go-to is always teaching self-awareness, even to children, and I teach them how to breathe. And a simple explanation: a car can't go forwards and backwards, a car can't go left and right, so you cannot be angry and calm at the same time. You cannot be anxious and calm at the same time.
Yes.
So that simplistic convinces them it works. So breathing, meditation. I've been doing meditation with kids a lot.
Brilliant.
And they actually love it, surprisingly. So for me, emotional regulation skills, managing your emotions. So that is missing, big time. And we can't identify when we are overwhelmed or struggling if we don't know how to identify the emotion in our bodies.
Yes.
It isn't the same for everybody. Your angry and my angry may not look the same. So that's an important skill set that's missing, and supposed to come from parents, though.
Observe behaviors, right? That's how you set the tone in a household. And I mean, when it comes to coping mechanisms that are not effective, do you find that, let's just say, particularly youth, but in fact even adults, they tend to lean into their phone or isolate themselves or not talk because it's too much of a hassle. I'm not going to let Shanaz know about what's going on. that also needs to be addressed just for a second, because I feel like that's the go-to for so many people when coping with mental health issues. They don't want to be perceived as weak. So what would you want to say to that for those people who choose that method?
So to understand that when you are overwhelmed, you want the escape, but also that there is a dopamine release, a feel-good hormone that your brain releases when you're on social media, when you're doing certain things. And turning to substances, a lot of youth do that because they want to numb the pain. So that also makes everything worse. It either activates mental health conditions or it worsens. If you have anxiety, it's going to be a lot worse. So for me, that knowing that there are bad ways we cope is one of the ways that, you identify what my go-to is and then find an alternative and keep looking for one that works for you. First time round, it may not be the one that works for you.
And that's so important as well. I love the meditation idea. That is so vitally important. I believe that more pop culture needs to include meditation, especially for kids. When you watch the shows, I believe that characters there shouldn't act out as characters that are animated. I feel like they should meditate more to help the culture. Just a thought when you're making your next animation. Christiane, let's talk about the workplace very quickly. People are on their way to work at the moment. This is a stress on its own. You're not getting paid enough. You have to travel a far distance to get to work in order to feed the family. Most of your money is going to transport, so you hardly have any you don't have money off at the end of, you're paying all your bills. So let's talk about employers assisting in this mental health ecosystem to support an individual. What are some of those things that you believe more employers should be doing more often?
Honestly, and the simplest way is to cultivate a culture of mental health. Be it in your workplace discussions, be it in the meetings, have mental health be part of the furniture. This is how we create an openness between our employees and the employer to have that conversations, difficult conversations around mental health. And with that, award or allow for certain needs to be met. Be it a bit more flexibility if necessary. Be it that we have HR or mental practitioner in the area on our calls, in our list of someone to help as a resource. Be it that our own management perhaps have looked out for those 4 signs and seen what they could do to help or guide that employee. Truly, by having those hard conversations, making it a culture, it becomes normalized. And it becomes the comfortable thing to do.
Comfort, big thing for us adults as well. A last message to anybody, if you are struggling right now and you're thinking that you're on your own, what do you want to tell them right now? Anybody. I know it's a big one, big platform for this, but it's important. I think they need to hear it from you.
I think the most important thing, Carl, is that you're actually not alone. And once you reach out, you're actually quite surprised. And even the most put together person that is portraying themselves a certain way on social media, when the camera goes off, they actually have the same fears, worries, and concerns that you have, but you don't know this. You think it's just you. So knowing that you're not alone adds such a weight of relief and release for you, because it gives you the comfort to do the next thing, which is begin your healing journey.
And love it. Healing journeys need to begin a bit more often. This is phenomenal. Christiane and Shanaz, thank you so much for joining us in a Feel Good Breakfast Show. We could chat for hours and long. It should continue. However, I want to give you some resources. One of them is the line that you need to know, which is a professional is waiting for your call if you need help. 0800 456 789. Do remember the number. It can actually be a lifesaver at times. And then, of course, sadag.org. That's another website you can go visit for resources and education around mental health. And please remember those words that often are used as cliche, but are powerfully true. You are not alone.